So 2024 has been a surprisingly good year for horror flicks. In this video, I'm going to talk about the top 10 horror movies released in 2024. Some of them were huge surprises. And in typical Flick Connection fashion, I'm going to tell you where you can stream all of these movies during the month of October. And my number 10 pick on this list is a doozy, and I highly recommend it for Friday the 13th fans. It's titled In a Violent Nature. Just like Friday the 13th, this flick features a slow-walking psychopath that is literally unstoppable. In fact, this movie is kind of a love letter to Friday the 13th and other flicks like it. But instead of just remaking a new version of a movie like that, In a Violent Nature literally has a different perspective. You're walking with this psycho for most of the movie, and yes, he walks very slow, and the whole movie does have a slow pace as a result. Fair warning, the movie features some disgustingly brutal kills in it, but it's also kind of artsy. The cinematography kind of pops at times more than you would expect. Ultimately, I think this movie did not deliver a good finale. I totally get what they were trying to do, and it makes sense. It's not terrible, but it was kind of a misfire, yet there's already a sequel in production for In a Violent Nature because it did quite well at the festival circuit. And even though I didn't love the way that this one wrapped things up, hopefully the sequel ratchets things up quite a bit because this flick is full of a lot of interesting ideas. Now, before my next pick came out, if you had asked me, I would have thought that a prequel to a 1976 classic just would not have worked in 2024 because they almost never do, but The First Omen does.
It's not real. 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 Who said that?
This is very real.
This is an insanely creepy movie. It's very effective. If you remember the original The Omen, there are some bizarre kills that occur. Demonically devised kills, but they're strange. That happens in this new one as well, but it never feels like Final Destination-y. It always feels kind of grounded and realistic, which makes the Omen movies almost as terrifying as The Exorcist. It's very effective, incredibly creepy, and feels like it's related to the original Omen in a way that I just didn't think they would have been able to pull off. But it is thematically disturbing and visually disturbing. I can tell you, as someone, I've got 2 children. I've seen 2 live births in my lifetime, and there's a lot of birth-related horror in The First Omen, and it is going to be too intense for a lot of you. By the end, though, I just thought this was a fantastic movie, and it takes place in the 70s in this convent, and it feels like a good period piece as well. This is just a solid flick that is just more disturbing than I would have thought. Now, my next pick is included on AMC Plus and Shudder. If you didn't know, they're basically one and the same. If you subscribe to AMC Plus, you get all the movies included with Shudder. And if you didn't know, Shudder is a horror streaming service, but they're loaded with a lot of original content. In fact, I'm not paid to sponsor them in any way, shape, or form. I highly recommend getting a free trial during the month of October because it's horror movie overload. So many, in fact, I forgot to mention that In a Violent Nature is on Shudder, and so is my next pick, Oddity.
What? Just open the door. I am telling you that there is someone in there with you.
Which is a great little indie mystery horror flick. It's got a bunch of fresh ideas, including a main character who is blind, which comes into play in ways that you're not going to expect. She's also clairvoyant, and she's got this bizarre doll that is just creepy to look at, and then it gets used in really great ways. This one, to me, feels a bit like a classic gothic horror mystery movie, but it's also filled with some brand new ideas and a bunch of faces I've never seen before. So in an odd way, Oddity feels kind of like a classic gothic movie, but it does have a bunch of fresh ideas in it at the same time, which is why I recommend this small movie. Next to some real bangers coming up, this is probably the least frightening movie on this list as well. It does have some scares in it, and it is dark and creepy, but I think most people could get into this one. If you're just looking for something new for the Halloween season, this could be a great way to go, especially if you already subscribe to AMC Plus or Shudder. Next up, I've got a very new release that is only available as a rental. It has not moved over to any streaming services as of yet. I fully expect it to, so you may want to wait for this one if you're not super into the way I describe Cuckoo. Now this one actually reminded me of several classic movies, one of them being The Shining. You follow a 17-year-old girl who's forced to move to this really bizarre resort with her family. Dan Stevens has an incredible role in this. He's got a bizarre accent. He actually adds a little bit of levity to all the scenes that he's in. But outside of some of the quirkiness that he brings to the table, this is a bizarre mystery that has some sci-fi elements. Again, this is not one that's going to horrify you, but it's really clever and interesting, has a bunch of fresh ideas, but just like Oddity, it also has this classic feel to it. Even though it does have horror elements, Cuckoo comes across as much more of a thriller, meaning it's not going to terrify you really at all, but it is very exciting and is filled with lots of just bizarre horror elements.
Consider yourself lucky.
But not only is Dan Stevens really great in Cuckoo, he's also fantastic in my next flick, Abigale.
Guys.
Another one that completely took me by surprise. If you saw the posters or the trailers for this, it looked very gimmicky, and it is, but it works in ways I never would have imagined. You follow a group of kidnappers, professional criminals. They don't know each other's names. It's got a little bit of a Reservoir Dogs thing going on. They kidnap a young girl, they take her back to the hideout, where they're all beginning to question each other, and then we find out that this is not a little girl. They didn't capture her. They've actually been tricked into bringing this creature into a place where they can't escape. That is the setup, and man, does Abigale deliver. They way undersold this movie when they were marketing it. It is much more fun than you would expect, while also being a bloodbath of a horror flick. Honestly, this type of horror movie is among one of my favorites. It's packed with surprises, it doesn't forget to have fun, it's gory but not in a way that's necessarily going to turn your stomach, and again, you get some just fantastic performances. I've already mentioned Dan Stevens, but these directors also did Ready or Not, which had a similar vibe. It was fun and bloody, but Abigale, again, like, you kind of know what you're going to get with it. It's just the best version of that you could get, I think. By the way, I just released a bunch of brand new t-shirt designs just in time for Halloween. We got this one inspired by Repo Man. We've got a Mad Max design, one inspired by the Goonies. But the Escape from New York design that I wore last week is the most popular of the new designs by far. You can pick one up by going to darrenvandam.com/shop or just follow this link. The shirts are incredibly soft and they're a fitted design. So if you like your shirts big or a little loose, definitely go a size or two up. But if you like them fitted, they're perfect. I love them. But speaking of stuff I love, my next pick is the final flick in the X trilogy, directed by Ty West.
The Night Stalker.
Night Stalker.
Night Stalker.
Is terrorizing Los Angeles.
I can handle myself.
So said every third girl in Hollywood.
And out of all of Ty West's movies, I think this is his best work. Maxxxine is currently only available to purchase or rent, but Max is going to be adding it on October 18th. X and Pearl are the other two movies in the trilogy. Pearl is included on Netflix right now, and out of all three, Maxxxine is far and away my favorite. And not just because it's a good horror movie. This is an excellent period piece. It takes place in LA in the 1980s, and it's almost as good of a period piece as like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I mean, it's done on a lower budget level, but all the shots of the LA streets at night and all the cars, it all looks amazing, has a fantastic soundtrack, and this is a movie lover's dream. I mean, not only does it have an incredible, and I mean an incredible incredible cast for a movie like this, but it's also got loads of creative movie references. I mean, there's a sequence where Kevin Bacon, one of the biggest stars of the 80s, is chasing Maxxxine into the movie set from Psycho, and Kevin Bacon is dressed just like Jack Nicholson from Chinatown. And that's what I loved most about Maxxxine, was just all of the clever ideas they packed into this, on top of it just being an excellent 80s movie. It looks and feels like a legit 80s movie, and there's all sorts of references, not just to movies, but like the Night Stalker killings are happening alongside the main storyline here. And ultimately it plays out a lot like an 80s movie would. You've got your slasher elements, there is some gore, there's some disturbing elements, but this is also not one that's going to just terrify you to death. It actually could make a great watch, especially for anyone with an affinity for 80s stuff like me.
Nicely done.
Thank you.
I would like to add that I have not seen Speak No Evil. It looks fantastic, it's got good reviews. It is a remake of a foreign language flick that is actually also available on AMC Plus and Shudder. But James McAvoy is just so incredible. He is the reason I want to see that movie, and probably the reason it would have maybe made this list. I'll also say that Alien Romulus is also one of my favorite movies of the year. I realize some people didn't like how much it referenced some of the other movies. I personally have seen it twice. I love it, and just didn't quite want to recommend it here because it was such a big movie. It seemed like I had an opportunity to recommend a lot of stuff most people missed. But next up, we've got one of the most talked about movies of the year, and that's in any genre. That's not just in horror. Longlegs, starring Nicolas Cage. Now, I saw this in the theater. I was pleasantly surprised, even though this movie had been hyped up, which is rarely the case. Oftentimes, hype can spoil a movie like this. Didn't happen with Longlegs. I loved almost everything about this movie. Micah Monroe from It Follows stars in this, and she plays an FBI agent. So there's actually a lot in common with Silence of the Lambs, more so than you would expect with a movie like this. Nicolas Cage is fantastic in the movie. Don't expect to see him too much though. That's also kind of the point. And it works. The movie's incredibly creepy. Now, it was hyped up as being terrifying. So much so that my wife almost refused to watch it, but I nudged her. I told her, I think you can handle this. There was a moment I asked her to cover her eyes, but outside of that, when the credits rolled, she was pleasantly surprised. It did freak her out more than once, and it creeped her out all the way through, but again, by the time those credits rolled, she was pretty happy with the movie and was definitely glad that she watched it. Another one we were both happy with, though, that also got a ton of buzz this year, and deservedly so, is Late Night with the Devil.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for a live television first as we attempt to commune with the devil.
In fact, my top 3 on this list are some of the most creative movies I've seen in a long time. And that's any genre, that's not just horror. They're all different and fresh, and Late Night with the Devil is a lot of fun. Now, it does go into some pretty dramatic horror directions, but up front, you're presented with kind of a lost tape or lost episode of a late night talk show. A late night talk show that's feverishly trying to keep up with Johnny Carson. So it's that era, and it feels like it, and that's part of what's so fun about Late Night with the Devil. I was too young to watch Johnny Carson going to bed at night, but if you did, I think there's a lot to love with this movie. Now, keep in mind, this is a pretty intense horror movie ultimately, but you do have to be patient, and the journey to get to the true horror in Late Night with the Devil, again, is a late night talk show. I found it to be really entertaining. David Dastmalchian, who you've seen in a bunch of stuff, he's the lead. He does a killer job hosting the show. If you're familiar with The Amazing Randy, there's a character very much like him. So I loved all of that stuff, and also just genuinely loved the aesthetic of this flick. But speaking of aesthetics, oh my goodness. So my next pick is currently in select theaters. You're gonna have a hard time seeing this movie in most of the country, but it is gonna be available to rent or purchase very soon, and it will likely be on streaming services later in the year or maybe early next year. I'm talking about The Substance.
Have you ever dreamt of a better version of yourself? Younger, more beautiful, more perfect.
In this movie, Demi Moore plays an aging star who feels like she's losing everything, not just her beauty, but her career, and decides to take the substance, which allows you to create a younger, better version of yourself. This movie has an incredible looking production design and cinematography. I mean, stunning from the very first shot to the last. I mean, like music video quality visuals, but it's incredible storytelling. It all works. Demi Moore is amazing in this movie. But this is not for everyone. This is a body horror flick in the vein of David Cronenberg. I think I like The Substance better than almost any David Cronenberg movie I can think of, which I know is going to sound like blasphemy to some of you. It's very much inspired by movies in that genre, certainly inspired directly by David Cronenberg's work. But oh my goodness, like, it's so glossy and so sharp. This also takes inspiration from The Shining. I mean, Demi Moore, like, goes to hide in a bathroom in one of the first scenes, and it looks like the bathroom from The Shining. There's insane movie makeup in this. I'm telling you, if you don't know what body horror is, there's a very good chance this movie is going to be too disturbing for you. In fact, there was an older couple sitting behind me in the movie theater that were thoroughly disturbed when the credits rolled on this flick. But I'm telling you, if you like that genre, if you've ever loved any of those real disgusting body horror movies, The Substance might be the godfather of body horror. I'm that excited about this movie. I saw it a week ago. I cannot stop thinking about it. I cannot wait to watch it again. I'm gonna hit the brakes one more time because this movie is that disturbing. This director, her previous film was called Revenge. It too was incredibly disturbing, but also just vibrant and in your face. I loved Revenge. The Substance is markedly better in terms of creativity and direction. It's kind of amazing stuff. Watch it at your own risk. It is a wild one, and the same goes for my number one pick, but my goodness, I've seen it twice now. My number one pick on this horror list, you can watch it at home now, and it is my favorite movie of the year, Strange Darling.
Are you a serial killer?
What did you just say?
Now, fair warning on this one, this movie features a fair amount of sexual violence. It's going to be disturbing for a lot of viewers, but here we are in 2024, and seeing this movie, I think, is the closest I've ever been in my life to feeling what it must have been like to see a movie like Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho in the movie theater when it was released. Meaning it's something entirely new, but also horrifying in an incredibly fresh way. I feel like I'm seeing a new voice brought to screen. It's loaded with twists, but all of the twists are surprising at how surprising they are. In fact, there are so many twists, I was actually concerned I was not going to like it nearly as much on the second viewing. I can tell you now, having seen it twice, I honestly think that this is a masterpiece. It's also worth noting, it was entirely shot on 35mm film, and famous actor Giovanni Ribisi is the cinematographer on it, and he's never done that before, and he killed it. The movie looks amazing. And it revolves around two lead actors, and they're both, like, absolutely incredible. Neither one is very well known, but they're doing about as good as a job acting as anybody could do. Both performances require kind of them to do two things at once in most of the scenes. And again, on that second viewing, you can see just beautiful little nuances in the acting. I can now say for a fact, I have oversold this movie, so lower your expectations a little bit. I don't know how else to describe it without gushing. I enjoyed this movie that much. In fact, the whole thing is right up my alley. If you typically like some of the more messed up and disturbing movies I recommend here on the channel, Strange Darling, I think, is movie of the year. But that is the list. Don't forget to go check out the new shirt designs over at the website, but I will keep making these videos as long as y'all keep watching them. Thanks for checking out the special horror list, and you will see me on the next one.